Welcome to Virtually Live, the podcast where we get insights from marketing leaders and event professionals. I'm Aaron, video editor at Kaltura. In today's episode, we're joined by Esther Matiasek-Asadi from Siemens Healthineers, Graham Addison from AstraZeneca, and Ashley Azapardi from Red Hat, hosted by Navi Azaria. Together, they discuss how healthcare, marketing, and corporate communication are being reshaped for a more connected future, with AI tools playing a key role, of course. Enjoy!
Good afternoon, everyone. Are we happy with the day? All right. Now, I do want to set the stage of this leadership panel. Every 10 years, there is a major disruption of technology. I will surrender my age, right? Back in the 80s, 90s, I did development on those small PCs, and that was the transformation back then in the 90s. 2000, many of us were in startups in the internet technology, which practically changed how we connected to people all around the world. And in 2010, that was cloud and mobility, and also the birth of Kaltura, being the first video cloud solution, providing employee and customers' experiences. But then 2020 came, and COVID arrived. And over a few days, we all needed to move to work from home, communicate from home, educate from home, market from home, right? And we thought that that's going to be all what this decade is about, right? 10 years of digital transformation. Little we knew that ChatGPT, Gen AI will be here on stage with us, practically transforming everything that we do. So this leadership panel is going to be about audience engagement, about using video to connect people, to monetize, to educate, and also how we're starting to touch Gen AI technology in the workplace with the complexity of data privacy, of GDPR, PII, data collection, and the ability to drive better employees and customer experiences by using those video-infused AI technologies. We'll start with introducing our esteemed speakers. Maybe we'll go one by one. If you can introduce yourself, your company, each one of your companies are practically changing the world, right? On how we're engaging with patients and healthcare and technology, and also share one big decision that you made in your life, in your career, that you are proud of, that actually made a transformation. Esther, maybe we'll start with you.
Thank you. So I'm Esther Matiasek-Asadi from Siemens Healthineers. I have been with the Siemens family for 17 years across countries and continents and industries as well. So most recently based in Germany for over 3 years, heading up the global events team. And what Siemens Healthineers does is one of the world's biggest medtech companies. What we're doing is all sorts of medical equipment, diagnostic tools. We do treat the major diseases, and one of the key visions we have is to deliver access to care around the world with our technologies. So a lot of the things what was talked about, so the AI, efficiency, productivity in the healthcare medtech arena is incredibly powerful, and that's where I have no limitations in this, and I just want to adapt right away. When it comes to marketing communications, it can be a bit more interesting, but that's an industry where you really see incredible benefits for access to care around the world.
So morning everybody, my name is Graham. Global Head of Marketing at AstraZeneca. I used to say AstraZeneca a couple of years ago, everyone was just like, who? Right? Things have changed a little bit since then, unfortunately. So I'm currently Global Head of Marketing. I focus working one of our cardiovascular medicines, which I've been doing now for the past 5 years. I have responsibility for defining global strategy, realizing commercial opportunities, and executing our operational plan around the world. And of course, I don't think AstraZeneca needs much of an introduction, but we have certainly, in fact, today our CEO Pascal just launched our vision to transform care. So our bold ambition is to reach another 25 million patients by 2030. So I know that he just launched that today, actually.
So it's slightly complicated. So as of last Monday, I'm now the head of corporate IT for Redpin, which happens to be just over there, which is fantastic. So yeah, I was at Red Hat for 12 and a half years, saw it grow from 4,000 employees to 25,000 employees. We got purchased by IBM a few years ago for $37 billion. And since then, they've been trying to make their money back a lot faster than they hope, I think. So I made the decision to move to Redpin. And throughout that sort of period, I mean, and I guess part of today as well is going to be where IT fits between the communication side, right? But one of the big decisions that went through as I was running through communications and video, and Red Hat was always very much a hybrid workforce, even 13 years ago. And we were very much video first, pre-pandemic. So when the pandemic happened, we just went home, and everything carried on working, and it was great. But doing that from an IT perspective versus the communications and internal communications has been interesting. And part of that decision being, all right, let's dive into video. Ironically, I then moved to Raleigh, North Carolina with my family, just because you still needed to be in a corporate headquarters to get anywhere, regardless of how much video you did. So yeah, that was my big decision, but thank you.
And Ash, let's speak about you, right? In your position in Red Hat, you really owned internal communication, right? And your CEO and your previous CEO is now the CEO of IBM, great communicators. So how you enable them to drive their message across all the employees of Red Hat? What was your secret sauce? What methodologies that you use to make sure that their message is being heard?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Like I said, from about, I guess, 10 years ago, we were approached from an IT perspective of, hey, can you just make this tech work, right? So we started, okay, how do I get this video media to everyone at Red Hat? Now, again, 10, 12 years ago, everyone was still using Skype or MSN Messenger, or I just moved to Skype to Business. We're a Linux company, right? So I haven't used Microsoft until I started work last Monday, right? We moved to Google at some point about 8 years ago, but we had this big collection of equipment, big collection of video rooms. Everything was still on ISDN. And they were like, well, how do we reach, back then, 4,000 people? So we started working through, okay, well, let's look at the bridging, let's look at the technology, but found still nobody was coming to watch the communications, right? Nobody was engaged purely from, we weren't getting any questions. We weren't really, when you were asking inside offices and you were doing polls afterwards, nobody really knew what we talked about in these town halls or company meetings or streaming. It was just a thing for executives to hear themselves speak, right? And they were really focused on who was in the room, right? So they'd always have to have a mic in front of them. They'd always have to have people in the room. So when I had multi-country speakers, that became a jolted experience. So what we did was start to sit down with the execs and go, what are you really trying to communicate? Because nobody's listening, right? Apart from the people smiling at you, which are usually your executive staff, nobody's actually listening to you. What do you want them to hear? How do we create that into a bite-sized chunk so that the remotees can understand? How do you do a remote-first experience, and then I'll go and put it back in the room, right? Because it's these remotees, like there's 50 in the room, there's over 3,000 remote. I can get you a bigger ego boost from the 3,000 people if you can create content that they're willing to listen to, but I also need you to use the technology, as limited as it was back then, in order to be heard, right? Please don't use the handheld mics, because the jewelry that you're wearing is messing with the sound, and as soon as you mess with sound, they're off, right? Because then they can't hear you. Then they've already disengaged. They're already sharing cat videos on the whiteboard that's in the tool, right? It's just, you've lost engagement. They're there, but they're not listening to what you're saying. So it was really an education of the speakers to say, okay, forget the technology. What is your content? And then I will mass produce that and get that out to people. And as things evolved, technology got easier for us to be able to present. And I think COVID really gave us the opportunity to really show them what being remote looks like, right? And now everybody was on the same playing field. Everybody was equal, right? And we finally had a meeting equity because everybody was trying to do it from home while homeschooling and all this sort of stuff. So it needed to be short, concise. The content had to be snappy. The presentations had to be clear. And again, I think the biggest win was getting our finance department to actually provide slide decks that people wanted to see, like bonus information with
No
big
tables?
lines. No tables.
No table.
No tables. Just, here's a big line. This is good. This is bad. Please do more of this, less of this, right? And just concise. So it was mostly around forget the technology. Just think about what you want people to hear, and then we'll reverse engineer it.
I felt your pain earlier because this particular project I tried to get off the ground, I felt like I was banging my head off the wall a lot because I was consistently failing at pitching it to senior leaders to try and get them to invest in it. But they did eventually.
So Marco contacts info was there, just bring him to the boardroom, right? He won't convince anyone.
I could have done with your help, actually, I think. But we basically, the product I work on prevents people from having secondary heart attacks or strokes. So it's in the acute setting. The particular challenge that we found is that when somebody has a heart attack and they're discharged from the hospital, they find that particular period really overwhelming, and they don't have the capability, the capacity to take in additional information. So what happens as they progress from that point of event out of the hospital into the community care setting, they aren't getting the right information they need at the right time, and they aren't getting the support that they need as well. So what we came up with, what we wanted to do, was to really offer that support in a holistic fashion. And we have patient support programs that are a traditional approach that we use quite a lot with many different medicines. What we wanted to do differently this time, though, was really make it impactful. And so this is where AI came in. And we also changed it a little bit because we didn't just focus on treating the patient. We also focused on treating their caregiver. And when I say caregiver, I mean their husband, their wife, family member, or friend. Because without that level of support and without their engagement, things are very different when you look at a patient in isolation. So what we managed to do was actually map out the journey of the patient and their caregiver as they progress from that point of hospital. And we actually created short video content. So these were 30-second clips in some instances that gave advice on diet, lifestyle, the treatment, the medication that they were discharged on, side effects potentially to look out for, and what they could do to make themselves feel better. So this was looking at increasing patient outcomes. What the AI could do is actually take that curated video content that we had a library of. It would analyze the medical records. It would know what that patient was like. The AI had the ability to understand what is that patient's motivation and what is the patient's ability to change. And so as they were discharged from the hospital, it then kicked in. It knew who that person was, and this was spread across multiple channels. So the patient was signed up to an app, but it went out across text and other channels. And what it did was it served up content when the patient needed it. So it was the right content at the right time along that patient journey as a patient.
Also the right format, right?
Yeah.
To make it snackable in essence.
Exactly. So a very short form content. But I think what the difference is here, we didn't just target the patient. We also served that content to the caregiver. And the two channels were connected. So the caregiver was getting messages, perhaps a short video from a healthcare professional to say, have you thought about how your wife might be feeling at this point in time? These are things to consider. And so that would prompt the engagement from the caregiver.
So maybe on that same topic, Esther, I know that you are really, as a marketeer, content repurposing is one of your core values, right? And recognizing that your sales cycle in Siemens is 3 to 5 years, if I recall, right? So you have to have multiple touch points in the customer journey. Some cases, the customer has to touch content even multiple times in different formats for different decision makers, right? So how do you think about content repurposing, and what technologies are you thinking about in this area?
Absolutely. So yeah, the question was, when we aligned earlier, if we can really pinpoint any of our events or activities to a certain decision making, and our buyer journey is incredibly complex and long. Therefore, to justify any investment based on the small steps, you can't really. So you really need to map what is happening and how you engage with the customer. And therefore, any tools that helps us with content curation and see how our customers are engaging with that certain content, that helps. We do reach multiple stakeholders, and also that's I mean, with any global organizations, that's always the challenge, isn't it? That you have the headquarter organization and then you have your local entities, and we all engage with many of the same chains, with hospital chains, with key decision makers from the medical area. Therefore, what's very important when it comes to content is really to find that main purpose that is important for the customers. And it's not rocket science in a way in healthcare, because what is going on, you are really having major resource issues in the medical area wherever you go. You don't have enough doctors, enough nurses, therefore that will always resonate. If you say, hey, I have a solution for you that will make your hospital run more efficiently, more accurately, your decision makings are going to be shorter, and exactly like it resonated with me, the whole decision making thing, because that's where AI, for example, can make a huge difference. Pre-screening CT, MRI results and flag it to the doctor. We were talking about a digital twin, so it's exactly tying into what you said. I mean, you talked about cardiovascular and the secondary occurrence, but if you imagine that you have your own digital twin, which has all your family history or your medical data there, and you present with a new symptom, but then we can really have a personalized care, and you don't have to go through every single process that you normally would with that new symptom, which might be an incredible strong headache, but we already know a lot of your prehistory, and we can even stimulate certain solutions for your medical care, and then this digital twin will respond to that. That is just such an enormous saving that you can have in time, in effort, in investment, in local presence of hospital staff. That's definitely the future. And this is a message, and this is the storyline really what resonates. So it comes down to the storytelling, find that purpose, and be consistent with your messaging across your channels, your touch points around the years, and have that personal relationship, because at the end of the day, we all know people buy from people. And I feel like that's the magic combination of at the end of the day, seal the deal.
What do you envision? Where do you see it coming together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's I think it boils down to the two sides outside of the normal IT and the data side, obviously, that we talked about before. But from a data creation, the sentiment monitor, I think, as we talked about earlier, with knowing somebody is actually engaged, it's ridiculously hard to measure, right? Unless you're actually putting on their camera to see what they're doing, right? It's what are they doing on the screen? Are they active in the chat? Is that a good thing, right? Because if they're chatting the entire way through your meeting, is that a good thing? Are they engaged, or are they? Because I can't listen and type at the same time, right? So using AI to really prompt nicely, it's almost that Netflix, are you still there perspective, right? But also customizing the content as you go. I think that real-time aspect is really, okay, what I'm receiving is making sense. How do I then refine that on the fly so that the content coming in at me is what I want, right? Especially if I'm at if I'm at a conference, or I'm watching, or I was at Google Next and we're watching what's happening, right? It's so broad because you're trying to cover IT, healthcare, fintech, etc., right? Like at a Red Hat level, I didn't have to worry about compliance, right? So every time, yes, I have to worry about GDPR, yes, I have to worry about customer data, but our product's free and open, right? There's no IP, right? We sold free software, right? But now I'm in fintech, I actually have to pay attention to all that stuff, right? So I have to pay attention to credit card information, I have to pay attention to finance. How do I get that snippet almost real time? And I think that's the AI perspective going forward, is it's less people listening to the sound of their own voice presenting. It's almost, here's a collection of data and I'm going to organize it for you so that if I need the right healthcare information or the right technologies in my hospitals or wherever it's going, you know who I am, you know who you're selling to, and it's the right creation of content for that moment that will keep me engaged.
And I know this topic is very close to your heart. I also heard you speaking about that last year in IMAX, also in the small roundtable that we spoke about your family, your kids, right? And but I would love to hear how you are thinking about creating a more diverse experience, right? More accessible experience that communication fits everyone.
Yes, so looking into into events in particular and see what you can do. And normally when you just ask, like, say accessibility, then everyone thinks, oh yeah, a wheelchair needs to be able to come in. Luckily now, recently, it got more in the spotlight and you understand more about how inclusion at any touch points with your brand needs to be much broader than that. So what we see as well, because very often I get the question, okay, do you have targets being given to you? How much more sustainable you need to be both in the economical and in the DEI area? We don't really. We do have that on a corporate level, but when it comes to the functions, to marketing, HR, communications, we don't necessarily get that. So we decided to walk the talk by the factor that if someone comes to us with their project, then we would, in our return brief, when we go and present all the options, the sustainability and DEI measures are already included. So we would have several, like we have a big template, we have a big checklist and a strategy, and we just cross-check very quickly. It's a really easy way to go to first look, okay, how are we more sustainable in the economical way, but also then DEI. And then if it's the language, if it's to make sure that if someone gets easily overstimulated, then we offer a room where they can just go off and breathe a little bit. We make sure that if someone is a new mother and needs to either bring the baby or have a separate facility to cater for their needs, then we offer that. It's a really interesting balancing game because you're very, very restricted with GDPR of what you can and cannot ask. So I can never ask you, do you have an allergy, even though I could kill you literally if I'm not aware of it.
Don't kill me.
But it's really controversial because you have a huge responsibility. On the other hand, you need to make sure, because it's your medical condition, I can't ask you. Therefore, it's also an educational thing that we now don't ask you if you have an allergy, but we would say, do you have a preference? And then in brackets, you can say also including allergies. But that same thing is educational in a way that if you are, let's say, a young mother, you probably don't think that they would give you a facility to bring your child. So we really needed to start to communicate subtly in a way to make people feel comfortable that if you have any special need at all, if it's food, if it's location, if it's accessibility, whatever it might be, if it's gender inclusive bathrooms, then we create in our registration and in platforms a way where people feel comfortable to share it with us.
Well, thank you so much for putting diversity and DEI in the forefront of your action. I really appreciate that. It's important for all of us. Maybe I will summarize our panel for a second. What I've heard is that those three amazing leaders are transforming their organizations. I've heard two initiatives. One, it's about engagement and about digital engagement. That's the core of the future of the digital transformation. And second, we heard it also from Marco, we all need to reskill ourselves. The digital twin, it's a new experience. AI is going to be there. If we like it or not, if we are denying or if we are angry about that, it's going to be there. The IMF spoke about 1 billion jobs that are going to be changed in the next 6 years. And those are our jobs. But it's our responsibility to go back to our organizations and evangelize the change. Change on how we engage and change on how we skill. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, team.
Thank you to our guests, and thank you for tuning in. Join us next time for another episode of Virtually Live, the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.